We are back with more college football coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering all of the conference title game action, or Week 15 as it says here. But to get straight into it, starting out with Troy at number 25, James Madison, for the Sun Belt title. Now, James Madison is one of those teams entering the week that were in consideration for a Group of 6 bid, and it felt as though they could notch this pretty easily going up against a somewhat weaker Troy team. Although at the same time, this was a squad that gave Clemson a run for their money earlier in the year, so you couldn't really put anything past them entering this one. Let's just say that this game for a while definitely saw both teams struggle in their own respective ways. They mentioned that the Troy quarterback, for example, had come back from a load of different injuries across the season. In the very first snaps that he gets into the game, he's already getting banged up, already laying down on the ground in excruciating pain. He tried his hardest to muscle through it, but eventually it would get back to him. And that was kind of the theme of the night for Troy. They could not protect that man at all. And it did them in eventually. As for JMU, they would try to establish the run game. Granted, their quarterback, Barnett III, is definitely more of a running style of player here. That's just his game. Whenever they resorted to having that man throw the football, not gonna lie, some of the receivers, for example, there was a situation where he actually had a really good ball thrown, and Wisłowski just managed to drop it early on. Those things can't be controlled per se, but with this kind of situation developing here, you have to catch those. Those are just gimme plays. Literally, entire first quarter for the most part was filled with 3-and-outs back to back for both teams. But Troy would eventually give up a James Madison field goal, and that would be the very first score of the game here. They started to figure it out as the game waned on. Troy through the air and James Madison through the fucking ground. Ra Thomas and also Taylor for Troy ended up being a pair of solid weapons for Crowder to utilize. Thomas, I think, is a player that I've heard of before. He's definitely well known for his speed, and he managed to beat them over the top on multiple occasions. Even the broadcast team put it perfectly when mentioning how they would look for different shot plays in man coverage. James Madison, for whatever reason, kept on deciding to trust their DBs like Culp and other guys to guard up. Also, Brown and Barksdale. They just kept getting beaten time and time again. And eventually, Troy was able to punch it in from a yard out to give themselves the lead. But, man, as much as they wanted to mention how one of the other James Madison running backs was on a bit of a hot streak entering this game, it would be Wayne Knight for the Dukes that would single-handedly win them this one. Next possession, within just a single play, that man ran that shit right up the gut for a 73-yard touchdown score to take it right back. And while Troy would hang on, it's pretty much worth saying that James Madison would never really look back from that point. Defenses held on strong for just a little bit of time, but whenever they gave Knight the ball, I will say, Troy, no matter who they threw at him, they couldn't stop him. You wanted to limit the big gains, but really for James Madison at that point, it's about burning clock. And with Barnett III being a running threat too, it just made it all a bit more easier for them. That would be pretty interesting to see as well Because it's like he has the ability to throw the ball really well. Like this Wisloski touchdown catch was a beautiful one, strong one over the defender. It was also a really damn good throw from 26 yards out plus as well. I don't know why exactly that wasn't happening consistently. But hey, it is what it is, man. Troy would have an immediate response, getting Meadows, one of their running backs, in for a 2-yard touchdown. And that would essentially take it to the half, with James Madison having a 17-14 lead. It just kept on getting slow pace. Now, granted, weather was adverse, and they even had to tell fans in the stands to not throw snowballs on the field. But just for context, Troy, despite having those couple of rushing touchdowns, were not doing so hot on the ground themselves. Like I mentioned before, both of these teams got it done in different ways. Yet Troy became the first team since 2022 with negative rushing yards and multiple rushing touchdowns in any half. The last time that happened was Miami back in 2022 versus Middle Tennessee State. Wow. And yet, this was a one-score game. Somehow, some way. Every single time, though. And I guess this was the recipe for Troy at the end of the day. Because they would punt the ball themselves, unfortunately. And they would also lose Crowder at some point later in this match. Because he just kept on taking hit after hit after hit. And it got to a point where he was just flat out on the ground, sprawling in pain. And multiple people had to come over and help him. It was bad. But for James Madison, they would eventually find it, as I noted here, literally just night and day with this offense. Like, the rushing game was on point, but at times, Troy was able to force them behind schedule, and it led to Barnett III making some pretty risque decisions, including getting lurked on this interception here to White, and that would promptly be followed up by Troy not capitalizing on it. They didn't move a single yard. They had their guy miss the field goal, and they lucked out again by having James Madison fumble the football on a very good rip out, I might add, by this defender here. Like, it was truly clean. They had a short pass on an RPO play, finally get Barnett III to completion, and that just completely nullified everything. And they still went 3 and out on the very next drive. So, all right, like at some point, something's got to give, yeah. Once more, though, this Troy defense, and I didn't watch the full fourth quarter at this point, but they got another stop. Despite a long run from Barnett III, they managed to force them to turn the ball over on downs, and they still, with Crowder out, just struggled to do much of anything. They had to punt themselves, and James Madison figured that it was just time to stop playing games and allowing this team to linger around the whole way if they weren't going to take advantage of these mistakes. So they promptly got themselves multiple big runs, including back-to-back ones with Wayne Knight having a 40-yard gain, and then Alonze Barnett III getting a 26-yard rushing touchdown. Like, they threw a flag there. Nobody cares. Promptly, the very next drive would have Troy suffer a sack, fumble, and then a scoop 6 for Spinagatti. And thus, James Madison would win 31-14 on Friday. Is for the numbers here, Barnett III, overall, he had a passing and a rushing touchdown. He completed just 40% of his passes. 3.7 yards per pass attempt. And 93 passing yards, along with 85 rushing yards on the ground. Not the prettiest day at the office. However, as a team, James Madison ran for 322 yards. Almost 8 yards a carry, around that, in 2 total scores, with Wayne Knight having 21 of those rushes and 212 of those yards. Domination. When you can impose your will like that, and granted, they had the conditions there. They didn't even really have the greatest edge in time of possession. But that volume and the effectiveness of those runs fucked this Troy team up mightily as this game continued. As for Troy, though, they would have wanted to be a bit more efficient on this day from their front. They had the advantage in passing in terms of yardage, but only had Crowder complete just 44.1% of his passes. And then Gilchrist in relief didn't really come in and do all that much better. Not to mention the rushing attack for them. What attack? A lot of this deals with sack yardage because of how the James Madison defense was able to get after him. I mean, they had 8 sacks in this game. So that's a testament to the defense. But at the same time, negative 26 rushing yards is fucking crazy. And almost a negative yard a carry. That ineffective rushing offense against this damn James Madison team, you truly fucked up there. And so, hey, James Madison would be awaiting their shot. And granted, at this point, it's already gone down. But I will do something similar to what I did last year in terms of going through the whole CFP selection process. And kind of looking into more of the overall information from the different matchups, all of that good stuff. Instead, for now though, have to move into another bowl game, title game rather, with potential CFP implications in Tulane, I guess, versus North Texas. This was at a neutral field. Tulane versus North Texas had the home field advantage. I wonder whether or not that is just the general site for the American Athletic Conference Championship, but I'm not sure. Nevertheless, Tulane and North Texas is both coming into this year had great seasons to this point. So much so to where both of these coaches, in Summerall and Morris, would stick around. And what do you know? They're still there coaching these teams in the hopes that they can extend their season with a potential CFP bid. Or at least just stick it out with their guys for another game in the year. If only. Boy. Because it's crazy. And they weren't just treating this like any other game either. Both of these coaches, man. I remember a situation specifically in here. I think it was Morris. He was livid. Giving his full fucking fury to the ref. Trying to defend his guys on a play that he had a dispute about. And you just, in a day and age where you gonna have coaches leaving in these situations, with what we just been talking about, with Lane Kiffin and everything like that, again, Tulane and North Texas might not be perceived as threats to these SEC schools, but still, to stick it out with the process and still have that kind of passion for your job and the school that you're representing, to go out there and still go to war for your God. That says a whole fucking lot. Real shit. In terms of the actual game, with what I saw early on, it was competitive very early. and then it just hit the fan very, very, very quickly. Maker at times had a good read of what he was doing, and he would eventually lead the team down the field, getting a touchdown catch over to Williams after they converted multiple crucial third and fourth downs even on this drive. But Tulane, not to be denied, would have a long touchdown drive of their own. They took damn near the rest of the quarter balancing it out. This is nothing that Retzloff isn't accustomed to. I mean, we know he was running similar systems at BYU. And Tulane definitely has the talent to make it happen. It might not always show at times, but that's okay. As long as it did in this game, they were going to be fine. They just continued to dink and dunk their way down the football field and also got in some timely runs with Retzloff getting himself a 2-yard touchdown score on fourth down to tie up the ball game. This is when stuff started just getting completely bad for North Texas. Everything at that point got bad, very bad. Like, offensively, they actually had a decent drive going. And, if they were able to respond instantly here, I mean, things could have been very different. However, the way that this drive would end would set the stage for pretty much the rest of the game. You had Tulane get after Maker at this point. One of their D linemen in Westmoreland got a huge sack on him. And then on the very next play, he's trying to find an outlet, and he gets it over to Hawkins, who subsequently gets the ball punched out of his arms, and Tulane recovers it right on the spot. They have perfect field position advantage, and hey, man. From there, it would be McClure in a play that I actually ended up missing. Would just rip a 30-yard gain down the field and then just follow it right up with a touchdown score. And the Mean Green, of course, in the battle of the greens, Mean Green Wave, they would proceed to go 3 and out and lose 17 yards on their drive before giving up another field goal to Tulane in a similar fashion, just having them balance out a few passes, some gashing runs down the field. And at that point, you can't really do anything about that. Or at least your time is running out to do so. Because now, if your offense is just taking all this time getting off the field so quickly, you're exhausting your defense out even more. And maybe that is exactly what Tulane was trying to pull here. Now, for North Texas, while they would still have a brief struggle offensively, they did manage to overcome a big Tulane play. Nearly forced a fumble of their own to potentially steal a possession back. But either way, you get the stop, it's fine. You have less than a minute left in this half, but there's something you can still salvage out of it if you just get on the field and call the right plays at the right moments to get your guys in the best possible opportunities for success. Instead, they don't even get a chance to do that because with what I did see here, literally, you can't make up how this shit happened. Like, the ball is still bouncing around a little bit, but as long as you move out of the way, the play is essentially over on this punt. Tell me why this man Tipton for North Texas doesn't even have his eyes on the ball, isn't even looking at his surroundings. He's literally just jogging around in a comical way. And you watch it. The ball appears out of nowhere and lands right at his leg, essentially. Bounces on him, and Tulane gets the ball right back off of that muff. Simply because this man wasn't fucking paying attention. Yes, it is probably an honest mistake. But again, the way that this game had been shifting for the Mean Green at this point, that's the last possible thing you could have allowed to happen in that situation. And now Tulane had all the room in the world to drain out the rest of the clock themselves and potentially doubled it because they got the ball to start the second half as well. Given that North Texas had the first drive in this game. So this could have been dangerous territory for them. And if North Texas wanted any shot at winning the game, even if it was already a 10-point lead, it might have been getting out of hand a little bit. But they needed to hold strong on this possession, or they were going to go outside. And North Texas did the best they could, honestly. They held the goal line staying solid for a good amount of time. But as soon as Retzlaff crossed that goal line again, with pretty much 3 seconds left on the clock, and taking it right into halftime, as soon as that happened, it was, it was a wrap. And I didn't watch the second half at all. But shit got even worse from there. Now, luckily for North Texas, from what I'm seeing here, Tulane would open up with a missed field goal despite taking off damn near half of the quarter themselves. However, Master would promptly follow that up with back-to-back drives, ending in interceptions, one resulting in a pick six by Rogers, and the other with them nearing goal-to-go territory. Right in there, with a chance to score a touchdown. Gets picked off in the end zone. Up by 24. Pretty much the third quarter is coming to a close by this point. North Texas was going to have to pull off a miracle of epic proportions to get the job done. And for a second there, they kind of had it. I mean, you got a deep 59-yard touchdown catch from Coleman on fourth down, from what I'm seeing here. And you also had an 88-yard drive, that resulted in another touchdown and a 2-point conversion. All of a sudden, it was back to a 10-point ball game with around 9 minutes left. That's not too bad, especially considering where the hell things were just at a few minutes beforehand. However, they just could not take away Tulane's desire to run the foot. They couldn't. They couldn't. And they let them bleed 6 minutes and 35 seconds off the clock after that. Even if it only resulted in a field goal, you needed a possession way sooner than that to try to get yourselves multiple scores. That would be the goal at this point. That was the worst possible thing that could have happened. And Master would promptly get picked off again, resulting in a 34-21 Tulane win at home. Like, it's tough for North Texas. I'm sure that even now they're still feeling it a little bit. Because if they win this game, I mean, they are probably the team that has a much better chance at getting themselves in the CFP, of course. And they'd worked hard for it. They performed exceptionally well this season. And it's got to end like that. It's always tough. I think they're still eligible for a bowl game. Of course, it's not totally over, but this is probably Morris's last game with the squad, given that he is now the Oklahoma State head coach. You have to credit North Texas again for being willing to have him coach and him accepting the opportunity to still coach his guys. and at least finish what they started this year in some way. They didn't get the result that they wanted to, but for a North Texas school that has been through quite a lot, like, again, I remember them in the Conference USA, not the American. That is definitely an identity shift, to say the least, but they came all the way from that in their earliest time in the American to now saying that, hey, they had a chance this season to get the conference title. That's a huge step forward. So not too sure right now if they figured out a potential replacement for Morris, but their fans are certainly not going to forget that season. And I mean, hell, if they get a good bowl matchup and you have a chance to pull off something even greater, like, job's not necessarily done elsewhere. Y'all can still have a pretty magical end to this one. As for Tulane and getting into the numbers, hey, they've got a chance to fight. Retzlaff had 194 total yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on 59.1% completion. McClure also had 121 yards and a touchdown, matching the same amount of yardage that the North Texas squad had as a whole. Yeah, that's right. Tulane also ran the ball 50 times and averaged a clean 4 yards a carry. As for North Texas, Drew Messemaker had 294 yards and 2 touchdowns with 3 interceptions, all in the second half, unfortunately, on 61.8% completion from the field. And Coleman had 7 receptions for 125 yards and a touchdown. Dorner had 6 receptions for 76 yards. And Williams III had 4 receptions for 52 yards and a score. Like, so far, it's crazy to think that all of these games, like, I will say that on paper, if you're looking strictly at the box score, North Texas, Tulane might have looked to be a little more competitive, and granted, they got the ball, they got the game within 10, right around the 9-minute mark of the fourth quarter. That could have had a chance to be something. But it's safe to say that all of these games up to this point had been blowouts. Literally, the most competitive one that I was not even paying attention to on the Friday was Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State for the Conference USA title. Even the Mountain West title game didn't have any major implications like that, but UNLV got their asses kicked promptly. It's like, geez, like you expect these teams to have a little more fight in them, I guess. And that just wasn't really happening all that much. Or at least you can't question that per se. But again, the on-the-field product was definitely underwhelming for a couple of these squads. Safe to say that on Saturday, even when we get to more of the Power 4 games, it kind of underwhelmed early on. We had to start out, though, with number 11, BYU, and number 4, Texas Tech, playing in a neutral site at the time. Now, and we all remember when we talked about the first matchup and just how close it was early on, only for BYU to completely tail off under the pressure from this Texas Tech defense and the offense waking up later on in the game to ultimately beat the shit out of the Cougars. And that was just last month. Credit to BYU for getting to the stage, but hey, if you wanted to come out and win this game, while also potentially having a chance at the CFP if you do, you at the very least needed to win or make this as competitive as possible. You could not get blown out like the way you did in November against this squad. You just couldn't afford it. And what do you know? What do you know? I mean, literally, you could copy and paste bits of what I said relative to the flow of the game. In the first one, you could copy and paste that and approach this game, this iteration of it, in the same exact way. The same exact way. Like BYU did allow a decent drive to Texas Tech early on, but it didn't result in much. Like their defenders got down to business and made sure that Texas Tech was not going to initiate their own style of offense. They're more of an 8-8 style, and they do have their pair of dynamic running backs themselves. But ultimately, by forcing them into a 3rd and long situation, well, they had no other choice but to punt. Now, I will say that BYU also had a fitting response. Like, they got a long drive. They favored a lot of shorter plays. They didn't really have too many explosives on this drive outside of Carson Ryan just randomly getting himself open for another 22-yard gain. And this time, it was Parker Kingston throwing him the ball off of one of his world-famous sweeps. The collapse came over to his way. And it was the perfect play call for the situation. You can tell that Texas Tech understood at this point by playing them already that this is something that they'd rely on. They didn't expect that at all. Truly caught them off guard. And ultimately, it would be the run game to get BYU into the end zone with LJ Martin rushing for a 10-yard score. Now, again, it wasn't all that easy for Texas Tech, but you had situations where they broke through. Virgil got himself multiple 15-plus yard catches on this drive, and eventually Cameron Dickey would get himself a couple of crucial plays as well, essentially having them settle for a field goal at the end of this. But points are points in it, as long as it wasn't something consistent, because you want to get touchdowns at the end of the day, and that's just how it goes. It was a solid first attempt at it. And then BYU just hit a wall, like, in multiple ways. Yeesh, man. I mean, between them having their offensive sputtering completely, and also having Aiken, one of the wide receivers for Texas Tech, just completely moss the hell out of a guy who was labeled as their best cornerback in Johnson. Perfect throw, too, I should add. I mean, it was beautiful. I'm not going to lie to you. And it got Texas Tech the quick lead. Everything else in the first half was it had their own bit of intrigue, I should say. BYU would try to respond, but they would merely be forced to settle for a turnover on downs. And while Texas Tech had themselves a grand opportunity to go up by multiple possessions if they saw fit, they themselves would have Harrington miss the field goal. Oh, but it's okay. BYU's now got a chance to right their wrongs. Instead, they don't move the ball a single yard, technically. And finally, Texas Tech, just before the end of the half, would take advantage of a longer run by their other running back in Williams. Only a guy in Wall who has consistently been a force for BYU all season, he would actually force the fumble on it. It got punched out, and it started rolling all over the place. In fact, it advanced. And the tight end in Carter Jr. for Texas Tech would get his hands on it to give them a first down. deeper in BYU territory. That's just something you actually can't make up. But at the very least, BYU forced Barron Morton to throw multiple incomplete passes in a row. The coverage was exceptional, and Texas Tech had to settle for a field goal of their own. Still a 6-point ball game, still close. But again, same theme as it was in the last game. And even when we got to the halftime show, a good point was made by those guys running college football scoreboard that it's like BYU is not a team that can afford to be trailing by multiple possessions given what they intend to do on the offensive side with running the hell out of the football. That's a fact. They got themselves in the same position in the last game against this very team, trying to come from behind while being a run-first squad. And it backfired then. If they tried to do it again, it wouldn't make any sense for it to stop backfiring at that point. They'd already seen everything you were attempting to do beforehand. They'd already laid witness to it in the previous matchup. You didn't think they would expect that stuff again? Like, come on now. And it would be crucial for BYU to try their hardest to keep this close. And, slowly but surely, the effort would be futile, to say the least. They did get a nice long drive to start out the second half, which I did not watch. And honestly, given how it went, I mean, hey, like it was all Texas Tech. But you also had BYU shoot themselves in the foot on multiple occasions. You get this long drive, and with Farron usually being accurate from that range, he misses the kick, giving the Red Raiders the ball right back. BYU still has a chance, though, because they forced a turnover on downs, but then Bear Bachmeier throws an interception that gives them the red zone start, essentially, on this drive. And all it took was one play for Cameron Dickey to bang his head on the goalpost. All right? You get back-to-back punts, followed up by a different BYU turnover, and then that led to another Texas Tech field goal. An interception would lead to a missed opportunity for the Texas Tech squad here, but BYU would still turn the ball over on downs right after that. And then that would be pretty much the nail in the coffin, with them getting Aiken a 28-yard touchdown catch once more and pushing this thing up 31-7 after like that damn fast. Filled up all those points. BYU would promptly fumble the football again, leading to a different Texas Tech score and giving them the 34-7 win on Saturday afternoon. Like it's just not a good sight for BYU. They went out in pretty much the exact same fashion, allowed a little more points here. And the story of that game essentially does come down to how they performed in that late stretch. I mean, you have this interception, you have this fumble, you have a turnover on downs, you have a fumble as well. 3 different turnovers and 4 different possessions, ending unfavorably for you and playing right into the cards of a hungry Texas Tech squad with one of the top defenses in the nation. And you thought that you could mess around with this defense like that and expect to come out on top. It just was not going to happen. And the Cougars, while they'd had a great season this year, they didn't come even close in this one. So while they were still a team that could be in consideration. It'd be hard for them to still say that they had a chance to get into the CFP after a performance like this. I mean, at the very least, put up a much better fight than this. And they did not at all. Baron Morton had 2 touchdown passes on 215 yards as well on 60.6% completion. Williams had 80 rushing yards and 15 carries. Cameron Dickey had 18 rushes and 72 yards and a score. Virgil had 8 receptions for 86 yards. Aiken had 3 receptions for 66 yards and 2 scores. And Jacob Rodriguez had 13 tackles in this game, while Roberts had 2 interceptions and 2 pass deflections with 6 tackles. As for Bear Bachmeier, I should say, in BYU, I guess you could say that Texas Tech has been the main team that has made BYU and Bear Bachmeier, by nature, look essentially like the true freshman that he is. 115 passing yards, 2 interceptions on 59.3% completion. Those are far below the numbers that he's contributed as an overall player to this BYU squad. He's definitely not a player that's all there. He's not going to come in and be a perfect player, but he's done just fine enough throughout the season to be considered one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. This was definitely a bit of a shocker. Definitely. Again, that Texas Tech defense is nasty, and they deserve more of the credit there. But, absolutely tough. LJ Martin had 19 rushes for 76 yards and a touchdown, and Parker Kingston had 4 receptions for 44 yards in this game. They also had a different graphic on College Football Scoreboard looking at a few different teams and the last times they had secured a conference title and also secured one outright. Texas Tech, per that, given that they won the game in that dominant fashion, they would secure their first outright conference title since 1955. And likely with them already being in the top 4, it's safe to say that they would keep their season going and be a very likely candidate for CFP contention. So that's definitely credit to those guys there. Like, man, they for most of the season have exuded similar dominance. So it's not hard to see why they're already ranked where they are. Man, that could be interesting come CFP time. But all right. Well, this one was no different. But with the nature of the game itself, it's always been this way. Number 3, Georgia. And number 9, Alabama. In the SEC championship game in Atlanta. Tell me where you've heard that before. It legitimately happens all the time. And again, the narrative all the time, for good reason, is that Kirby Smart can't beat Alabama in these games specifically. It doesn't happen for one reason or another. And yes, we can look at Tua Tagovailoa getting subbed in for Jalen Hurts at halftime in the championship game, college football championship game. We can look at Jalen Hurts getting a quarterback change as well in the same situation, whether it was Jalen Milroe being there last season. No matter who you want to look at, Kirby Smart just cannot close the deal against the team in this situation. Yet has constantly been one of the winningest coaches in college football, generally speaking. Man, this game was chaos, bruh. This game was chaos. For Alabama. Georgia was fine. They were fine. They were fine. Alabama might have been starting to hit panic mode a little bit. The game plan was similar to this. The first time, I should say. They could not let Ryan Williams get going. And I don't understand this about Alabama themselves. Now, they would have a situation later when the game was far out of reach where Ryan Williams dropped a would-be touchdown catch. And he did have plays before in this game where he showed the electric nature that he possesses as a player. But more often than not, whether it was the coverage on the back end or just the decision-making, Alabama rarely decided to look his way even. And I didn't get that. I could give you an advantage to open up your offense a little bit. And you figured you'd have to go with an air raid attack because their rushing game was also just incredibly weak in this. Ever since Jam Miller has been dealing with whatever it is that he may have been dealing with between injuries and things like that, they have not been able to figure out. They've tried to patch it up a little bit, but it's a glaring issue at this point. And that would not change much against a Georgia run defense that is like consistent. Out of every single year, under the Kirby Smart era, even when we get into the 2020s, looking at their run of national championships, their rushing attack on the defensive side of the ball, in terms of limiting it for an opposing offense, they've legitimately brought in the best of the best in the nation across the seasons when it comes to their front seven and their ability to stop the run. Alabama had to have seen that coming, right? They had to have, because there's no way. That being said, defensively for them, and even as I was watching different video of an Alabama fan trying his hardest to deal with it, defensively, it could have been a lot worse. Honestly. It could have been. I mean, Stockton didn't have the prettiest day at the office either. And Georgia would get by on volume. That's typically how they do it. But they weren't that effective in the run game either. They were not. Bama's front seven did a great job eliminating that. And they also got some good pressure on Stockton at times. They were able to force Georgia in multiple situations that led to quick, easy stops. However, every single time that happened, it would be undone with miscue after miscue. Like, literally, the earlier game in the season in September came down to turnover margin. And it came down to who won that battle. And Alabama had some laughably bad ones in this game that led to them completely shitting the bed here. A block punt, okay, would start them off. And you gotta think about this. They get multiple stops on a pretty damn good Georgia team. Their confidence is sky high. And it is instantly undone with a blocked punt that gives the same Georgia team a short field to work with. Just a matter of 21 yards. It wouldn't be hard to see how they would score a touchdown there. And in fact, wild stat to throw out for Georgia as they would get in a different Robinson on their squad in for a 1-yard touchdown catch. Kirby Smart, before this situation, had been 17-0 when his teams have blocked the kick. 17-0. But it gets even better. It is even better. Because Alabama would try to get themselves a response again. As I mentioned, they had Ryan Williams make a hell of a play. Then, Ty Simpson just decided to, this is a massive overshoot. And Everett, one of the D-backs for Georgia, that would get talked about a fair amount, he would definitely capitalize on that, getting an interception of his own, giving Georgia another pretty easy field to work with, and in a matter of 14 plays, bleeding the clock. That's where their identity lies. Efficiency helps, but man, they know that their defense is that damn good to where it's hey, if we can continue to suffocate a team like that offensively, man, we're straight. We can do whatever it is that we want to do. Give Dylan Bell all the gadget plays in the world. Give Chancey Bowens all the runs. Nate Frazier's getting stuffed with a little bit. Okay, we'll rely back on Dylan Bell and we'll get him in for a 5-yard touchdown catch. Stuff like that going on. It does remind you, for all the, attention we want to give the Philly Bulldogs in this case, with that connection between all of their D linemen in the school and all of their linebackers in the school, offensively, you got to get the same vibe when they're at the peak of their powers. That is Georgia football to a T. And it's kind of what Philly does as well. Now, does it always work? No. Definitely not for Philly this season. It's working just fine for Georgia. Enough to at least hold on to the lead, I should say. The rest of the first half, you just had timely stops from both defenses, ending in punts for both teams. The score remained the same. A 14-0 deficit at halftime could definitely be demoralizing to a Crimson Tide fan who was expecting way more offense than that. It's not the worst thing in the world, though. You still have a chance to get right in the third quarter. Get it back there. You have the ball to start out, so you can work up some momentum from that point. No. Because, simply put, one of their front seven contributors in Thomas just would not have it. Simpson went down pretty much immediately on this third down to give Georgia the ball right back, and Zachariah Branch got himself a solid return, doing a little bit of everything in this game as well, I might add. They continue to not allow themselves to stretch the ball down the field to him over the top. But he's still been reliable in the short game, and he's gotten work as a return specialist as well. He would actually contribute to a first down pickup here, and eventually, with Lawson Lucky also getting himself an 18-yard gain, they would have Nate Frazier Jr. punch it in from 9 yards out. The blocking was exceptional as well on this play. He had the leverage outside regardless, but they got the block out there, and he was free, untouched, essentially walking into the end zone at that point. Way too much open space in that situation. Way too much. But it was still viable. It was still viable. You had 10 minutes and 47 seconds left at that point in the third quarter. You can still make a rally. In Alabama, again, yes, they would finally get themselves on the board at pretty much the start of the fourth quarter on a pretty creative screenplay to Jeremy Bernard working his way all across the middle just to get the ball in the first place, then weaving all the way back across the right side of the field, shifting his way through the defense and actually stiff-arming a few defenders to break loose while getting himself in the end zone for a 23-yard touchdown catch. That being said, it still took them numerous punts before then just to make it happen. And when they also had a shot to follow it up, they just had some of the weirdest decision-making imaginable. I mean, Simpson, for a player who had been perceived as pretty accurate, the numbers will tell you. There were multiple ones in this one where receivers and him just weren't on the same page, especially when you look at the running backs. Yes, the running backs. I mean, I cannot count the amount of times that I saw a running back have to overwork themselves to get one of these footballs out of the backfield. And that would trickle down to other wide receivers throughout the game, including this one, anticlimactically. You have Simpson just get completely banged up on this third down play, and then also have them fail to even move the ball, to even get any kind of read going. Completely flopped on this fourth down. And thus, Georgia, all it took was Zachariah Branch to run an RPO screen on third and very long. Made a man miss and turned upfield with the world-class speed that he possesses to get himself a 13-yard touchdown catch. And at that point, Georgia had completely blown out Alabama. Just dog walked them. No pun intended, right? 28-7 for the Bulldogs, who would promptly secure themselves a very likely opportunity to be one of the top 4 teams in the CFP rankings. It was mentioned, though, fittingly, that Gunnar Stockton had a pretty good stretch of fourth quarter contributions against ranked opponents this overall season. And that wouldn't change here. Georgia didn't feel any pressure collectively to have to play out of their element in the fourth quarter. They just didn't, even when Alabama scored. They didn't need to get themselves in spots where they were just forcing the ball into pretty unfavorable windows, in calling a bunch of high-risk plays that could lead to turnovers. They didn't need to get themselves unsettled like that. At no one point in this game did it feel that way for them. And it's wild. Like, a complete just anomaly in multiple ways for this Alabama team. I mean, at times in the first game, Georgia was the team dealing with that, not the other way around. And they just never found any true footing in this. Not at one point. For the numbers, Stockton had 156 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes on 76.9% completion. As a team, they had 143 rushing yards on 38 carries. And Zachariah Branch had 5 receptions for 53 yards and a score, while Dylan Bell had 4 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. As for Alabama, Ty Simpson had 212 passing yards on 48.7% completion, a touchdown, and an interception. But the rushing attack, okay, so all right, just think about this for a second. We just came off of a couple of different games talking about how teams completely outperformed the other in the rushing attack, and how on the ground there were multiple teams who at a point had suffered a negative output as a team in terms of total rushing yards at a given point in a game. Well, unfortunately for Alabama, they would set a historically low benchmark, as their -3 rushing yards as a team would be the second fewest in an SEC championship game all time. All time. They tried to patch it up. They tried to get Ryan Williams out in space at a point. They tried to get the Waddle clone a sweep, and that didn't pan out. They tried to make Ty Simpson a runner, and they were all over it. In between Hill Jr. and this other running back in A.K. Deer. What a name, by the way. All those guys have a lot less experience. I know Hill Jr.'s been getting some burn this season. But even in those games, he hasn't really been the most efficient guy in the world. And I don't know. Could things have gotten better through the air if they had a threat at all in the run game? To speak of, maybe. You can question why they had Simpson drop back 39 times in this game. But again, that's seriously an overall issue if you can't establish any sort of run game. Especially when we're getting into postseason ball. You know teams are going to want to rely on that more often than not. Even if you have the strongest air raid offense in the nation. Like, it's that one-dimensional quality. They made them that way. And they promptly paid the price. Jeremy Bernard had 6 receptions for 62 yards and a touchdown. And Hill Jr. had 5 receptions and 50 yards out of the backfield. Edwards also added 3 receptions and 42 yards. So, man, that's just wild to think about. Not to mention as well for Georgia, another component to this that didn't help Alabama. And I don't even think that's a reflection on the defense. But you had them at that point consistently getting out on the field and at that point being exhausted with what they were tasked to doing, also being put in unfavorable spots by having offense set up Georgia in some way, shape, or form in positive field position or even in plus territory on a few occasions. Georgia went 4 of 4 in the red zone. Every single time they reached it, they got in. And again, you didn't make them work that hard for it. They took it right from you with what you gave them off of a turnover or off of a block punt. You cannot give teams layups like that and expect to overcome that in time. They had a chance to, but it rarely works out that way. Also, Georgia would get their largest win against Alabama since 1976 to add even further insult to injury following this loss. Tough, man. Absolutely tough. Crazy that both of those games would turn out to be this way. But with the fucking nightcap, it would get exponentially more competitive. Say what you want about this game, but the Big Ten title matchup between number 2 Indiana at number 1 Ohio State at the time was an absolute classic. We'd been asking the entire time, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? And you got an absolute defensive struggle between two of the top defenses in the nation. And at the end of the day, it was going to come down to who could impose their own brand of physicality in a much more effective manner in this one. And that is what would happen on the very first play. On the very first play, legal hit, mind you, Curry hit Mendoza extremely fucking high. Extremely high. And he was down for a second, holding his shoulder. It was taken out of the game for a play. In something that could have been even more devastating than what it actually ended up turning out to be. Because, I shit you not, in just a single play, he was right back in the ball game, trying to lead this team down the field. Only Caden Curry would not relent on his pressure at all, actually crossing the 10-sack threshold in this game and on this drive, nabbing him behind the line to gain, far behind the line of scrimmage, and forcing Indy to punt. Ohio State themselves would face a bit of deja vu from last week. Julian Zion himself would be intercepted again off of a tip pass on the first possession of the ball game, on his second pass attempt of the ball game, just like it went against Michigan last week. And it would set Indiana up after the pick in pretty good territory themselves. But the red zone defense, yes, red zone defense, man, as the broadcast team said it, as it was figured to be a factor in this game beforehand, it absolutely got to that point. Like, both of these defenses are too legitimate, man. Once Indiana got in the red zone, there was a lid on it. And Mendoza failed to even complete a pass at that point, forcing Radicic to settle for a field goal at that time. And while Ohio State would try to get their duo of Tate and Jeremiah Smith going on the outside, the pressure from Indiana's defense was just as unrelenting. Unrelenting, man. That, like, it's not all about the quarterback, again, but, the way that both of these defenses were making it exponentially difficult for them to be effective in this game. Like, it was truly a battle of wills out there. And it would get that way to an even greater extreme, as Indiana, by that point, had started to establish a little bit of the run game. But they themselves would meet a major mistake with a Lorenzo Styles Jr. push, which actually ended up being legal on this RPO screen. That happened, and then you had the ball get thrown in that direction. It bounced off of Riley Nowakowski and into the hands of Davison Igbinosun to give Ohio State the ball back in pretty good territory. Indiana would actually get a pair of solid stops, but they would be matched by penalties, getting Ohio State in goal-to-go territory, and eventually they would get a touchdown because they allowed Carnell Tate, of all people, to creep right through the back of the end zone. As soon as the linebacker stepped up, nobody was anywhere near him, and, well, that just can't happen against this Ohio State team. It can't. It just can't. Indiana has their own punch as well, though. They, with Kalon Black, as the broadcast team so affectionately likes to call him, all it took was a 37-yard run from him to get them deep into OSU territory. But once again, as they neared the red zone, Kenyatta Jackson Jr. would step up yet again, even if he's a guy who apparently doesn't get talked about as much as some of the other guys. Jackson Jr.'s had his own good season here. He would sack Fernando Mendoza V, and Radicic would miss the field goal. As crazy as that was, and as shocking as that was, that wouldn't be the only missed field goal in this game. Yeah, I got to do that to myself. Tough. But Ohio State would have their own response in play, getting a deep shot to Jeremiah Smith. Keep in mind, Pons was the matchup on him, and I believe dating even back to last season, they have a connection that goes outside of football. They have a personal connection and have had it for a while, I believe. So, naturally, it would make sense to try to impose your will against him with your best corner if you're Indiana. Pons did actually have some solid coverage on Jeremiah Smith earlier in the game, but as I said at multiple points, sometimes that blend of size and speed just wins out. There's a reason why Jeremiah Smith is regarded as one of the best players in the nation, if not the best player in the nation if you ask some people. And as someone put it, the best non-draft eligible wide receiver in the nation at the moment. Like that, it just, that play just puts it into perspective. There is almost nothing your average defender can do about that. Even when you think he's covered, it's like he's just not. Man. Still, once Ohio State got into the red zone, and this would be a theme for them time and time again, it was always something. The Indiana defense was a constant, but Ohio State would always deal with something down in that stretch. Getting back into the Hoosiers, though, Charlie Becker would become a reliable weapon for them, and I guess you could say he has been this season. However, with some of the other guys, between Surratt, of course, between Cooper Jr., between Williams Jr., he tends to get a little lost in the mix. And between the Penn State game and this one, he'd make a name for himself. He got himself a nice contribution on that drop and would consistently go at Jermaine Matthews Jr. on the Ohio State side. Also, Lorenzo Styles Jr. in a later play over the top on a 51-yard grab down the field. He was absolutely tremendous in this game. And all of that would eventually help Indiana get down near the red zone. But again, Caden Curry on that ass as well. Indiana did try to get a little sneaky on this third down, though. They ran the exact same tight end screenplay to Nowakowski that scored from 30-plus yards out against Illinois in that blowout of a ball game earlier in the season for the Hoosiers. Luckily, it got stopped just short of the line of gain, and Radicic would get himself a 32-yard field goal cashed in. Ohio State would get final possession, but as they suffered another negative play with the pressure from Indiana in mind, they were forced to punt, and that would take it to the half. Now, at that point, Ohio State could get it back in the second half themselves. And it just continued to completely be a struggle. For a while, Ohio State not only had suffered all these sacks, but they had yet at this point to convert a third down. And with a couple of those in mind, they were facing 3rd and 29. They were not picking that up there. They were forced to punt immediately. And as I mentioned, you had Becker get down the field on this massive fucking dime from Mendoza V. But they would blend in a little bit of running. And the goal for Indiana was always to be ahead of the sticks. They were slightly ahead of the sticks, and they were facing third down at this point and relatively long. You cannot make this up. You can't make this up. Broadcast team, as this play is about to go down, they understand the Becker contribution just happened, but they were asking, where is Elijah Surratt at? Throw him a slot fade, something, anything. Give him a look to get him in the ball game. And they proceed. Mendoza the fifth proceeds to throw a slot fade over the top to Elijah Surratt in the end zone. And he mosses the Ohio State defender from 17 yards out to give Indiana the 13-10 lead. Like, that is some crazy timing. It's a hell of a catch from Surratt. You can't make that up. They called the fucking play before it even happened. That's the craziness, man. You have to respect something like that. Everybody had been wondering that. Well, you could no longer deny that, hey, he made his impact on the game right then and right there. And, man, little would it be known at the time that in the weirdest of ways, that score would hold. Let's explain. Ohio State would get themselves down the field on a fairly long drive themselves with a chance to respond. Max Clare actually was one of the first contributors to one of the first third downs they picked up in the game, period. However, as they continued to inch closer, Bo Jackson Jr. would continue to be a steady force. In fact, he reached 1,000 total yards in this game, rushing on the season, becoming the fifth true freshman running back in the program's history to do so. However, when it came down to it, on 4th and short, they typically run it with Julian Sain on the quarterback sneak, utilizing his size to his advantage and trying to find a loose hole in the gap to run through and push forward for a first down. They do attempt that on this play as we near the end of the third quarter, and it looked for a second like he got it. You know, things are all good. Ohio State's got the first down. Everything's golden. In fact, they would challenge it. And they pieced together evidence suggesting that he was well short of the line to gain as his knee initially touched before he could even reach the ball across the line to gain. Indiana would get the ball back and would have a solid drive themselves, just trying their absolute hardest to initiate some ball control. Luckily enough, the front seven of Ohio State would hold up and get them the ball back. And this would be this would be quite the drive. Yet another long ball dominant drive from Ohio State. I think as it waned on, it might not have always been the intent for them, but as they were just bleeding clock off, it became very clear that they wanted to have one of the final possessions in this game. And yes, there were some bumps. I mean, hell, they had this weird motion play to Jeremiah Smith that lost yardage, in fact. But when it came to a few third downs here, between getting a 20-yard catch with a beauty on the sideline from Cardinal Tate, between having a penalty on Kamara, one of the veteran defenders for this Indiana defense, which was surprising to me, on a double pass play. They were actually converting their third downs well. And before you knew it, Ohio State had a grand chance to actually, if they wanted to, win the ball game. And they got a good start. They got Bo Jackson getting an 8-yard run. They got him getting just short of the first down marker, yet again picking up a yard. Grand opportunity to continue to run the football at that point. Maybe Indiana was expecting it, and again, over the course of the entire game, their red zone defense had been money. It was going to take a hell of an effort from them to get another red zone stop on the squad to potentially save the entire thing. And that's exactly what would happen. Now, on the one end, I just don't understand, and I feel like somebody might have asked Ryan Day this. They probably should have. I don't know why they chose to go with a play-action fake on 3rd and 1 when they could have just ran the ball. By that point, you'd initiated it a little bit better. You had constantly been falling forward. That is the point. And all you needed was a yard. You don't trust them in that moment to hold up and get you one. This was before the 2-minute warning. And it stopped the clock with one of the Indiana defenders smartly batting the ball down, getting out in space and making the play. Got to credit him there. Then, on the 4th down at that point, I guess they felt it was a much better idea to just settle for the field goal. You were worked that hard to get down there? Okay, fine. And then Jaden Fielding missed a 27-yard field goal. Man. Between all the different times I've talked smack about different kickers missing chip shot field goals this entire college football season, and even some in the NFL this year, literally got a fucking flashback to the Georgia game and to open up the new year in 2023, bruh. Just did not need a flashback to that at that moment. And no one could believe it. Everybody was besides themselves. They could not understand what they just witnessed out there. But Indiana is more than willing to take it, especially since they had already dealt with a similar thing. No problem. Go out there, get a solid enough drive to put the game on ice. And hell, with the game on the line in a way, on this 3rd and long, they trust Mendoza the fifth here to take a shot down the field. And Charlie Becker gets the leverage on Jermaine Matthews Jr. and completely works him down the sideline, hauling in a catch from 33 yards out. And that was just before the 2-minute warning. Ohio State had to use all of their timeouts. And while they would get the ball back, they didn't have a lot of time to work with. They were pinned back far too deep to make anything happen. And at that point, the game would end. Jeremiah Smith actually did catch the Hail Mary, by the way. Size, what can you do about that at that point? What can you do about that? It's crazy. But again, far too short of the end zone. And Indiana would set multiple precedents here for their program, getting this win. And you have to give them tremendous respect. We can do the coulda, woulda, shoulda thing. But the sentiment here was always that this game was going to be a fucking dogfight, and a dogfight they put on and won. Not only did they win this game to secure their first Big Ten title win since 1967, their first outright Big Ten title win since 1945 as a program, but they also, in winning this game against the Buckeyes, finally notched their first win against the squad since November of 1988, where they actually won 41-7 in a blowout. It was a hard-earned, hard-fought victory in a game between a couple of powerhouse programs in the nation right now. And while I can say I'd be disappointed as an Ohio State fan to see them lose the game at the same time as an overall college football fan, period, This is some shit you have got to love. Because they would also, again, it's already understood, and I guess it would kind of lead right into the whole flow of the next video. They'd become a number one ranked team for the very first time in their program's history as a result of their win, and remain the only unbeaten program in the nation right now. But you had people in the earlier parts of the day questioning whether or not they were title contenders. Okay, so then what does that show you? What does this show you right then and right there? You see it. You can't deny it anymore. We do all remember that Indiana, again, for a while, had been bottom of the barrel, and they are still the second losingest team, or the team with the second most overall losses, I should say, in the second lowest win percentage in FBS history. That didn't matter. And that has changed tremendously over the past 2 seasons under Kurt Signetti's leadership and tenure as a head coach. It's crazy, man. You've got to respect that. Straight up. Like, I could be salty, but I can't be at something like that. You lost to a team that is truly good, and in this day demands their respect at all 3 levels. As for the numbers, Fernando Mendoza V had 222 passing yards on 65.2% completion with a touchdown and an interception. The team ran for 118 yards as a whole, and Charlie Becker in this game, even with Surratt getting the touchdown, had 6 receptions for 126 yards in this game. Jones, one of their linebackers, had 2 sacks and 2 TFLs along with 7 tackles in this game, and the team as a whole had 5. As for Ohio State, Julian Sain had 258 yards, a touchdown, and an interception on 72.4% completion. It was a solid game for both quarterbacks, but at the end of the day, they were able to confuse him at multiple points with the defense that they had been calling. And Mendoza V, at the end of the day, managed to come out victorious and have some of the defining plays in this one. In a game that was also labeled as one that could decide who would win the Heisman Trophy or not. And, the odds at this point have likely shifted in his favor. Again, well-deserved, given the head-to-head and given what he had been doing across the entire year. He already entered this game being the only player in FBS with at least 30 passing touchdowns and 5 or more rushing touchdowns. So he'd already been on that pace. But again, hey, you can't get any better than that. As for their rushing attack, a lot of sack yardage has to be factored in here, but 58 overall yards for the Ohio State offense in terms of running would be their lowest output since 2011. Crazy to even think of a time in which an Ohio State team struggled to have a competent rushing attack in a given game. It's rarely happened, but they got taken back into that reality in this one. Jeremiah Smith had 8 receptions for 144 yards, and Carnell Tate had 4 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown in this one. Sonny Styles also added 11 tackles, and Ohio State themselves had 3 sacks in this game. But it was not enough to outlast a truly good and respectable Indiana team. I'll have my own things to say about that when we get to the video. But I'm just saying, man, again, we just have to give respect where respect is due. And if anything, for Ohio State, it does show that they aren't necessarily invincible. Any team can be had on any given Saturday, but they're still damn good enough to be one of the best teams on a given Saturday to face up against in any capacity, in any situation. Things happen. Would it have been better for them to enter undefeated? Probably. But this was a similar situation last season. And, But finally, moving on to the ACC conference title game. In just one of the weirdest situations ever. Having Duke, an 8-5 squad, compete against number 17 Virginia for this one. This was also at a neutral site, so I don't think any one team had a particular advantage. But what I will say is that with how they went about starting this game out, they put themselves in such a good spot and managed to, at multiple points, show you exactly why they are an 8-5 team. They couldn't have started out the first drive any better. As I'm seeing this game go underway the whole time, I'm saying, you put everything out there on display. Pull out all the fucking stuff that you have to, because you are not extending your season after this outside of a bowl game. You are not in playoff contention. You have absolutely nothing to lose in this situation if you're Duke. Put it all out on display. Give Virginia every single thing that you have. They would. Between the combination of having Shepard prove to be a pretty solid running back throughout the duration of this game, and also having guys like Barkate, one of their X-Factor players, and also Hasley get himself multiple conversion opportunities in this drive alone, and would prove to be a key piece of this squad towards the tail end of the game. Duke would grind out a massive 9-minute and 38-second drive. They did face multiple fourth downs and were still able to overcome it. They faced multiple third downs and were still able to overcome it, with Jeremiah Hasley, aforementioned, getting himself in the end zone for a touchdown off of a screen play to give them the 7-0 lead after already cutting through more than half of the first quarter. Yes, that could be seen as a toxic way to start out a football game, but if you're a team trying to pull off an upset, that's how you are supposed to operate as a squad. That's how you gotta play it. And I can't knock them for doing it. Virginia had a nearly quick response of their own, only their field goal kicker would miss the PAT. Perfect time for Duke, in my mind, to pounce on that opportunity and make him pay for it. No. Not exactly. Mensa is such an interesting quarterback at times. There were even some plays later in this game that were impressive and make you understand why Duke acquired him as a transfer in the offseason. But then you have head-scratching plays like this. He stared down the man the entire time looking for Barkate. And he stared him down the entire time, getting read like a book. And he throws the ball. As soon as he does it, Costner gets the pick on him. And Virginia gives themselves a short field. They instantly score a touchdown with Taylor, a player who, Jamari Taylor, they had been profiling before the game, had actually been another steady force in this ball game for Virginia. And he got his first receiving touchdown of the season, I believe, on that play to tie up the ball game. But Duke, flipping and flopping in between BS and solid offensive play. Like, this was another textbook drive on how to engineer and cook up an upset, all right? That happened at the very start of the second quarter. Duke proceeded to take 8 minutes and 2 seconds off of the clock. Once again, getting a few short plays in here, having Shepard to rely on as a force, getting a fake punt play in a gutsy manner, pulling that off, extending the drive, involving Barcade a little bit, having another fourth down come up and overcoming that, overcoming a sack to get the ball downfield to one of their other guys in Higgins for a 35-yard gain, and run with some tempo to ultimately get Shepard into the end zone for a 16-yard rushing touchdown. And by that point, they had retaken full control. Their defense was also pretty damn good as well. Taylor would take a while to pick it up on the ground, and that is by and large due to how Duke was collectively playing him out of the backfield. They would force a punt here, and where I think Duke screwed up some more is that they just let him linger around. They went on a 3-and-out here. They settled for the end of the half essentially there. They had chances to go up by at least another possession in this and let Virginia just linger around even if they weren't doing anything on their end. Then we get into the third quarter and you have them both settling for field goals. Virginia tried to match the intensity. They tried to open it up with a 7-minute and 41-second drive of their own. But as they got deeper into the red zone, Chandler Morris crumbled, as Chandler Morris does. But seriously, though, I don't know what his decision was here in terms of keeping the ball on this supposed option play. I guess he was looking for something else, but he decided to hang on the ball for even more time and just got completely fucked up in the backfield. Then proceeded to have an incomplete pass. At least Bettridge would make it from in short. You would have Cooper Barcade, a Harvard transfer, mind you. Shit, it's crazy. This is why he was listed as an X factor, getting down the field for a 38-yard gain. And, damn. Literally, hauls in the fucking deep shot down the field. Duke's in prime position to score themselves. They also stall out, having to settle for a field goal. And you just get more of the same. Virginia had their own opportunity with Jamari Taylor, again, starting to get his own work done on the ground. But as they would settle for a 4th and 5, not in short enough range to trust the run game, they were forced to pass, and that would sail incomplete, giving Duke the ball back, and they themselves would be stuffed in third and fairly long territory, also forced to do the same thing. This one was, and should have been, a bit more routine, but this is the thing. Missing these routine throws, but then managing to make some of the most low percentage ones imaginable. It doesn't make any sense. Things were looking great for Duke after they got this instant interception from Weaver on Chandler Morris to give themselves a short field. They very well could have put the game on ice if they would have scored. And while Barcade would get an incredible catch, once again, mossing Costner on the boundary to get in goal-to-goal territory, that Virginia front seven tightened the fuck up. Holmes got back in there and crashed Castle's whole fucking party. And once Duke themselves failed to convert on this third down, they were forced to settle for a field goal. But hey, no harm, no foul. It was essentially over with them getting a 10-point lead with 5 minutes left. No, that wouldn't happen. At all. No. Nope. This game was far from over. They would charge right back down the field. The Cavs get themselves a field goal, and while Duke would settle for a short punt following a different conversion from Barkate once again, working off the scramble drill with Mensa to convert, they were stuffed in the backfield and forced to punt. They pinned Virginia back deep, but you have to give the squad credit for them to charge down the field once again 96 yards on a minute and 22 seconds of work is impressive. It took a few penalties, mind you, but still, between deciding to run the ball for whatever reason and then having some big-time throws here, including this one to Wood the fourth in the end zone for an 18-yard score. Another pretty damn good haul by a quality wide receiver. It would tie out the ball game, and thus we'd head to overtime. Because on a football weekend that was already chaotic in a way, it would be fitting to end it in this fashion. Of course, Duke went right to work, getting the first possession of overtime, and having Jeremiah Hasley, who started the game off with the scoring, get Duke on the board in the latter stage with the same result. And it was an and one because somebody decided to rough Mensa in the backfield as well, and that penalty would prove to be costly, as they would accept the penalty, but they'd have to kick the PAT anyways. It isn't something that affected Duke, so they went up by 7. But for those wondering what would happen with the penalty, you've got to enforce it in some way. Well, typically, the drives in overtime start on the 25-yard line, of course. Virginia would have to back their asses all the way up to the 40. And in that situation, compared to having a much quicker drive under your belt, having to work from that space on the field in extra time is tough. Very tough. So they would resort to something incredibly desperate. They would call a flea flicker from the 40-yard line. And Chandler Morris would do as Chandler Morris does. In clutch time, you can always rely on him to throw the ball to your team. As Murgat, one of the Duke defenders, would intercept a pass that was thrown so far short of the actual intended target. And thus, Duke would win 27-20. And in a similar segue, it would fuck the entire system up. As everybody kept saying, it legitimately fucked everything up. I'm not even trying to BS you. That is the chaos that you embrace as a college football fan. It is wild to think that Duke pulled off this upset, and even with it being at less than 0.1%, they still had a shot at getting themselves a nod in the CFP. Fucking crazy. But they went out there, they did, for the most part, yes, they had some bumps in the road, but I will say, they did exactly what they needed to do in this game and then some, to go out there and win. You can't deny that. They understood that the odds were relatively low, and again, they fought. They put themselves ahead of schedule in multiple capacities in this one. And even when Virginia managed to tie up the ball game, bro, they still went right down in overtime sticking to their game plan, never straying away from it, and trusting the system to go out there and pull it off. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Now, as for the numbers, Darian Mensah would have 196 passing yards on 76% completion and 2 touchdowns with an interception. Nate Shepard would have 21 rushes for 97 yards and a touchdown. Cooper Barkate had 5 receptions for 91 yards, and Nate Shepard also had 5 receptions for 31 yards out of the backfield, while Higgins also had 2 receptions for 31 yards. As for Virginia, Chandler fucking Morris, 216 passing yards on 52.5% completion, along with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He did also have 2 interceptions in the last game against Duke last month, but that was much better. In fact, he completed 92% of his passes. He had over 300 passing yards, and they won the game by 17 points. So think about that. Going from blowing this team out and making that game non-competitive to having them sneak up and into the ACC title game for Virginia's chance to win their first ever title in the conference and their first ever title outright, because they had never done it in their history. Never. And they also worked themselves back into it. It's not like they completely took the beating from Duke. That late game surge, a 1 minute and 22 second draw, seeing you move all the way down the field, the whole length of the field, to tie it up, that is impressive. That should be praised for sure. But still, for the majority of this game, you let Duke take absolute control of it. And I can't say in that situation that the second interception was on Morris. If you don't get the penalty right there, you're going to start from the same spot. And I have very little doubt that they wouldn't even think about running such a play in shorter distance. But you forced their hand. They had to come up with something. And it ultimately did not pan out. Unfortunately. Man. But that'll do it for all of the game action that I watched. To get into some of the other developments, aside from anything related to the CFP, I'm going to do that in that video, I suppose, sometime tomorrow. First, Kentucky would hire Will Stein, the offensive coordinator for Oregon. He was a name that had been thrown around at Penn State in their coaching search for a while. It does make sense. I'm pretty sure that even at that time, it was referenced that he had ties to the state and the school beforehand. So this might have been a no-brainer for them. And I guess Kentucky kind of needs that change. Like, let me see, because I know at this point, you'd had Mark Stoops for all that time, but you are really trying to build something new here at this point. Yeah, the man is now 58. I'm pretty sure that Will Stein is one of the younger coaches, or potential coaches out there, I should say. Yeah, he is only 36 years old. So, yeah, you're thinking, this is another hire of some young hotshot coach. Well, Kentucky at this point needs something. They need something new, a fresh start in this. Because to constantly rely on the old guard was not panning out for them at all. It just wasn't. They had to make a change. And I feel like it could heavily benefit them. I'll say. I have no problem with the move whatsoever. The way Oregon's offense has been over the past few years, he's definitely one of those guys that's got a creative ass play calling scheme. And that alone could definitely be a nice contrast from some of the fucking stagnant and underwhelming play that Kentucky has consistently gotten for years. They need it. No, I don't have a problem with the move at all. Something crazy, in my estimation, would happen for Vanderbilt as let me make sure I get this name right. Okay. Yes, Jarrett Curtis. The number 2 ranked player, or I guess quarterback, because he is a quarterback. Okay, number 1 pocket passer, number 5 recruit in the class. Yes, he is now a Vanderbilt Commodore as of a few days before, reported by other outlets all over the board, including ESPN. And he was originally committed to Georgia. And I'm seeing that, and I'm like, that is fucking massive for Vanderbilt. Another team who had been considered as a laughingstock for all this time was a team that would finish their season dangerously close to CFP contention, being completely bowl eligible with a chance to have a Heisman winner. And now they're continuing to capitalize off that because Diego Pavia can't stay there forever, obviously. They're going to have to bring in other talent. And I mean, hell, you gotta love that too. Like, there is probably a chance that Pavia is going to enter the NFL draft. I doubt he stays for another season at this point. They already fought to have him return for this season. I don't think there would be use in doing that again. But with the success that they've had over these past few years, well, now it inspires other highly touted recruits to want to come over and make their mark here. And Jarrett Curtis, in some way, was captivated by it and is now one of those people who will be putting on a Vanderbilt Commodores jersey next season. The only problem with this, and a major problem with this, is that he himself was not the person who informed the masses about it. I don't know what happened, but essentially, the stuff just got leaked. He wasn't even willing yet to tell the school, Georgia that is, that he decommitted. He did not at that point. Yet, other publications must have gotten a hold of the news somehow, and they just leaked it out before he could even say a word. And I'm like, that's pretty fucked up. Now, Curtis had to, I guess, on his own social media, come out with an apology about this. Like, that's a tough spot to be put in. You know, you're thinking you are in the best time of your young life right now, being recruited to this program. But it's spoiled by something just completely disgusting, if you think about it. Like, how exactly do you get hold of information like that? Maybe he told you, maybe somebody else told you, I don't know. But to take advantage of a recruit in that way, somebody that young, to just leak all that information out when you understood that the intent was not to inform anyone about anything just yet, that's a little shady, to say the least. And that's kind of a bittersweet way to start your tenure with the program. But at the very least, you know, he's still there. His decision is still the same and wasn't affected at all by this. So that's a good thing. And again, as I said, it's a great sign for Vanderbilt. A great sign for them. Truly. Even greater sign for Penn State, potentially, as they, on Friday, would finally find their man. And as a different report on my Fox Sports feed would say, this was apparently also this coach's dream job. Matt Campbell would be hired by Penn State on Friday and signed to an 8-year deal. I don't think it was mentioned how much the contract was worth, but man, that is a hell of a hire to get. That's a hell of a hire to get. I can't even lie to you. As it's been mentioned by multiple publications, Matt Campbell is the winningest coach in Iowa State history, with 72 wins and a win percentage of 60.5 overall in his career, along with a 56.7% winning percentage at the school. And they have seen pretty good seasons under his tenure. For most of his career, one could argue it's been mired in mediocrity a little bit, but that was just the nature of the Iowa State program at the time. And they had not been a team who has been in any sort of playoff contention at all. But when you talk about consistently being bowl eligible and bowl ready, they've been there. For a stretch between 2017 to 2021, he made 5 straight bowl games with this squad, winning 2 of them and losing 3 others. And not to mention, last season, Iowa State had their best season under his tenure and possibly in school history, with them going 11-3 and winning the Pop-Tarts Bowl, while also placing at a high of 9th in the rankings and also ending the season as the 15th best team in the country. So, for an Iowa State program that hasn't necessarily had a bunch of success in their program's history and have kind of studied the course, Matt Campbell has definitely seen them and led them to some much better days. But even still, when you have a chance to move up and move forward, at times you're going to want to stay put, and at times you're going to want to push forward and embrace that change. And I suppose that Matt Campbell was willing to. Penn State is in a similar situation right now. They want to go contend for a championship, of course. But they've got to start from somewhere. And Matt Campbell might be the very individual in their eyes who could make that happen, as a person who could bring the program to a resurgence and also have access to a better pool of recruits, potentially, I should say. I would argue that Iowa State over the past couple of seasons has probably gotten a little more, given the way that things can change. But I guess when looking at a broader scope of things, I guess people could say that Penn State has a better pull for some of the better recruits out there than Iowa State would. And you give them the access to go out and get these kinds of players, acquire that kind of talent, and develop the team at large. There's going to have to be a progression to this. I don't know if they're going to hit the ground running immediately and start busting out 10, 11 win seasons with Matt Campbell. But an 8-year deal shows me they have enough faith in him to have some patience here and truly play the long game. Because by playing the long game, that's where some of the more renowned championship contender squads have originated from. The pipeline has existed for a while in those cases, but even then, it didn't just start from nowhere. You had to consistently bring in great pools of talent. You had to consistently develop good habits in your program. Had to consistently hire the right staff members at the right points, retain the right guys, let some guys loose, and deal with potentially having your own talent post at the same time, being able to recuperate in some fashion. And every single school that you consider a championship contender in the nation at this point has accomplished that. Penn State, it's not the only reason why they had the year that they did this season. But one can say they definitely went through a lot. Like, they had a lot of guys return for sure between Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Drew Aller is still going to be a question mark. I don't even know if he's going to return. I don't know if he enters the draft, but that might be risky. I don't know. He's got a big decision to make on that. Some of their defensive players are definitely good, but man, when it comes to staff for sure, you could say that they had a bunch of errors everywhere, in between losing a few players, their wide receiver core. They tried to go transfer heavy with that, and outside of maybe Trebor Pena at times, a name that I continuously seen in some of the Penn State games that I have been watching, like they had Kyron Hudson from USC, for example. I don't even think he was all that relevant on the team. Like, that flopped. Then, not to mention, and I hate to do it, Jim Knowles as a hire for the squad also might have hurt them, especially when you look at those games earlier in the season. I mean, they were just not playing up to par on that end. And again, execution is way different than scheming, but at every level, something went wrong for them. And again, they're gonna have to continue working through it, but they're giving Matt Campbell the time to make it happen. So I think this could be pretty good. Iowa State, to recuperate this loss of their most successful coach, most accomplished coach in their organization's history, they would hire Washington State head coach Jimmy Rogers. Man, he himself was a recent hire for them. And Washington State, over the past couple of seasons, they have gone through the shit, man. They have gone through it. I don't know what to say here. They were bowl eligible. Yeah, this was his first season. It didn't go so high. Yes, they lost John Mateer. That was always going to hurt them. But they just had such a lackluster talent pool themselves. And they were enough, I guess, as a unit to be 500. But when it came to facing off against stronger competition, you could tell that they just couldn't keep up. And promptly, just an underwhelming season for a school that has traditionally been good. Keep in mind, though, they are still in the two-man Pac-12 league until other teams join in 2026. That's going to be fun. I don't know. Like, Jimmy Rogers, I guess in a way, Iowa State would also be trying to rebuild their entire sort of culture. It's not that they hate Matt Campbell or anything, but he served a good amount of time there. A good amount of time. Rodgers is a little younger at this point. And, I mean, he's got other experience, as it looks like, in FCS. He was actually at South Dakota State for a while. So, I mean, that helps him, his overall resume. He is, as it says right here, 33-9 as a head coach overall. I guess his first real shot did come at Washington State in the FBS. It didn't go so high, but again, you're willing to overlook that if he's showing that much promise. You gotta find a way. So I can understand that. Memphis would hire Charles Huff, the former Marshall coach. And I can't even blame him for leaving Marshall at that point. Because all those players, all them damn players, decided to give up on him before the fucking Navy game. So I couldn't blame him, right? Joined Southern Miss. I think they actually, let me see Southern Miss this season. They definitely, in the game against Mississippi State for a brief period of time, were competitive until they got their asses kicked. But overall for them, let me get here real quick. 'Cause I just want to make sure I got this right for them. All right, 7-5. Pretty solid offensively. That's definitely respectable work. It's good to see that he's getting another shot. And hey, I mean, he's leveling up. Memphis themselves, they're trying to replace Silverfield. And I mean, hey man, like, This is a grand opportunity for him. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a grand opportunity. That's really my take on that. Yet another one I don't really have a problem with. Toledo would also hire Jason Candle for a couple of ones that you could probably scratch your head at, though. And I guess I probably could have gotten to it a little bit early, but it's fine. James Madison is going to lose Bob Chesney Jr., actually. I saw that he had a senior during the game. At the end of the season, as he was hired to UCLA, as I already mentioned, in the last video regarding, yeah. However, they still would need to find a replacement at some point. And so they would sign none other than former Florida head coach Billy Napier to a 5-year deal. I couldn't believe it. Now, again, just because Billy Napier was definitely bad at his job, he was also in the SEC, of course. And granted, you're going to find a lot of the strongest competition in the nation there. Fair enough. Maybe Billy Napier is a guy that is just going to thrive off of being exposed to more G5 competition. Maybe he could find himself with this school who has been a fucking machine in college football since they've entered D1 play. Legitimately. One of the best records since that time. I think it was like 40-10 with the game, as they mentioned in the graphic. Like, yo, they are on a roll. Signetti got hired and move to Indiana. You get Chesney keeping it going and having them in a position where they can contend for a CFP bid. With Napier's reputation in the SEC, I'm of the belief that he could very much put an end to that run. And that would not be great for James Madison. But if they truly believed that that was going to happen, they wouldn't go out and hire him for that much time. Again, maybe he is a coach that can sustain with weaker competition. Maybe he just can't hang with the big dogs. That's fine. But if he can find enough success with this school and at least maintain it, like don't have them completely drop off into not even contending for anything at all. Because then we're going to have a problem. I was so fucking shocked, taken aback when they made this move. But, thinking about it a little bit, like Napier, he just can't possibly be that bad. In the Sun Belt, can he? He can't possibly be. Matter of fact, oh my goodness. Okay, so, oh man, goodness gracious. I mean, he was at Louisiana, I assume, Louisiana Lafayette. Interestingly enough, in his first few years there, he had a record of 40-12. So, safe to say that, looking at that alone, he should be fine. Went 22-23 at Florida, though. Just again, he might just be mid in the Power 4. Potential Power 5 return if Pac-12 football actually makes some noise next season. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, just seriously though, some of these seasons, back-to-back bowl wins in 19 and 20 with Louisiana, and he had 3 straight 10-plus win seasons with the squad as well, including back-to-back seasons with just a single loss, and he actually got this team ranked as high as 15 in the AP poll at a point in time. So I guess it can be done. Fair enough. And Virginia Tech would rehire Brent Pry. Yes, the man that they just fired from the head coaching position a few months back is now back in the program on the campus with the team in a different capacity. He is now the defensive coordinator. And in fact, as they mentioned it on the ticker, this wasn't a surprise. He's previously been a defensive coordinator before. In fact, previously serving as a defensive coordinator under James Franklin at Penn State. So the connection between those two has always been there. And hey, look at them lobbying for Pry back in a way. He could be stronger as a defensive coordinator. We'll see. I guess they just couldn't get enough of him. As a head coach, he might have underwhelmed, but he could star in that role, and they may truly need that. Again, I don't think I would have to genuinely look into it to see if it's one of their top classes or if it will project to be one of their top classes. But Virginia Tech football has already been off to a great start in recruiting since James Franklin has been there. And with some of the potential defensive gems that they have on their roster, you're going to need a sound defensive mind in that locker room to get those guys right and get them in their spots to work to the best of their abilities on the football field. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.